Like an interesting and a current case is the case of Lapu-Lapu, kind of, and which illustrates how kind of tricky and messy this business of like conferring national titles can be. A monument to Lapu-Lapu was established in the Luneta, and that became the subject of a controversy. So there were people who wanted to remove it because it's out of place, kind of. And I don't think it became quite clear. I mean, like, I think the National Historical Commission, which said that it's reserved for the martyrs of the revolution. So kind of Lapu-Lapu is out of place, so it has to be removed. But kind of through the years, kind of like there are, like when Duterte, even while he was still campaigning, President Duterte, while he's still campaigning for the presidency, he made a statement to the Cebu media that if he becomes president, he'll declare Lapu-Lapu a national hero. And of course, he has an interest in, political interest in doing that, because he's speaking to his base. So that kind of is, in fact, I learned recently, because I followed kind of the story of Lapu-Lapu. In the early 20th century, there was a strong, like in Cebu, up until 1930, or not, something like 1933, there was no monument of Lapu-Lapu in Cebu. The first attempt to have a monument to Lapu-Lapu was made in something like 1912. So the local government of what is now Lapu-Lapu City kind of started the move to have a monument built to honor Lapu-Lapu, because this, of course, it was, say, why we have Magellan Monument, but we didn't have even a monument to our own hero. So they started a fund drive to raise the money to build such a monument. And then it turned out, and I learned this not too long ago, that there was vigorous opposition to the building of the monument. And the opposition came principally from two quarters. One, the Espanistas, like after kind of, honoring the man who killed Magellan. So, and I think the Espanistas were against the monument, and in fact they were arguing that the Lapu-Lapu monument is behind it are the Americans, and that in effect Lapu-Lapu is an American-made hero. The same thing that is said about Rizal. In order to deflect, in a sense, the Americans are pushing for the monument in order to deflect attention away from the American atrocities and kind of blame the Spaniards for everything that's bad in the country or something like that. The other opposition to a Lapu-Lapu monument came from the Catholic leaders in Cebu, because they're saying, why honor the man who kind of, in a sense, delayed the introduction of Christianity to the Philippines, so delayed by what, something like 44 years. So it's interesting that kind of the politics surrounding this business of kind of recognizing or venerating heroes. So that the first Lapu-Lapu monument was not built until something like 1933, because of that opposition. And so even today, kind of the status of Lapu-Lapu as a hero is somewhat kind of problem. How would you call him a national hero? And kind of he was fighting simply for local, in defense of his local turf. So that's kind of a highly politically messy kind of affair, kind of constructing categories like what's national, and which of course is not limited to heroes, but when you begin talking about national dances, what should be part of it, what is not, and so on.
Now that we're talking about the political context of the American colonial period in relation to
Yes,
Lapu-Lapu,
yes.
and going back
Yes.
to Tolentino's artwork,
Yes.
it seems that there's this paradox that the creation of a canon, Pantheonization, all these things happened under the sponsorship of the American colonial state. So can you please explain this seeming paradox?
Yeah, there's appears kind of to be a paradox in how you have a flourishing of kind of, in a sense, the things that I've talked about, kind of nationality, the sense of nationality, the symbols of Filipino nationality during the early 20th century under the Americans, and but kind of we're talking about the nationalism that was promoted in the early 20th century was what you might call civic nationalism. You know, kind of it's a benign civic nationalism. You know, like Resil's portrait in each public classroom. You know, right? Kind of. So the Americans were kind of promoting, kind of, or at the very least, kind of tolerating such displays of symbols of Filipino nationality, because after all, kind of, they felt that this not kind of upset the existing political order, and it kind of jives with the whole rhetoric about, you know, preparation for nationhood and eventual self-rule, kind of training in self-government. So it's all part of that kind of discourse on kind of preparation for nationhood, and so it's kind of it's civic nationalism which is promoted, which does not necessarily pose a threat to kind of American kind of rule in the Philippines. That's why, yeah, it's a paradox that you know, when did they started to popularize that the national tree is Nara and the national flower is Sampaguita. It was during the American period. In fact, the irony here, like I was talking about this, and a American was kind of in the audience, and he was saying that yeah, the irony of how in Filipinos in America, you know, celebrate these things like kind of tinikling, bahay kubo, kind of use these symbols of being Filipino that in fact were in a sense initiated or popularized first during the American period. You know, when did like for instance Juan de la Cruz as the Filipino, as kind of in a sense the symbol of the Filipino, when did that start? You know, kind of so.